The autumn rain painted Boston in shades of amber and gray as Becca Morgan sat in her tiny office, surrounded by wedding catalogs and vendor contracts. Her phone buzzed insistently against the wooden desk. Jasmine's name flashed across the screen. "Please tell me you're calling with good news," Becca answered, already sensing otherwise. A weak cough came through the speaker. "I need the biggest favor of my entire life." Becca set down her coffee cup, her stomach already sinking. Known Jasmine since their college days at Boston University, and that particular tone meant trouble. "My grandmother set me up on a blind date tonight," Jasmine continued between sniffles. "She's been planning this for months with her book club friend. I have the flu, Becca. I can barely stand up. If I cancel, she'll never forgive me." "Let me guess," Becca said, leaning back in her chair. "You want me to pretend to be you? Just for one evening? Coffee at the Harborside at 7? Be polite, make small talk, and leave after an hour. Please, I'm desperate." Becca stared at the stack of work on her desk. 3 weddings this month. 2 corporate events, and a product launch that kept getting rescheduled. The last thing she needed was to waste an evening making awkward conversation with a stranger. But Jasmine had been there for her during the darkest period of her life, when her engagement fell apart 2 years ago. "Fine," Becca heard herself saying, "but you owe me forever." Meeting by chance, the Harborside Cafe sat nestled between historic brownstones, its warm light spilling onto rain-slicked cobblestones. Becca arrived exactly at 7, wearing a simple navy dress and her favorite wool coat. She told herself this was just another task to complete, like confirming flower arrangements or coordinating seating charts. Inside, the cafe smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. Soft piano music drifted from hidden speakers. Her eyes scanned the scattered tables until they landed on a man sitting alone near the window. He wore a plain gray sweater and jeans, his dark hair slightly tousled. A worn paperback sat beside his coffee cup. "Nathan?" she asked, approaching his table. He looked up, and something in his hazel eyes made her pause. They held a depth that suggested old stories and quiet strength. "You must be Jasmine," he said, standing with a slight smile. "Please sit." Guilt twisted in her chest, but she pushed it aside. This was just one evening. They ordered drinks. He chose black coffee. She requested chai tea. For several moments, they sat in comfortable silence, watching rain trace patterns down the window glass. "Your grandmother spoke highly of you," Nathan said finally. "She mentioned you work in healthcare." Becca's mind went blank. She knew nothing about Jasmine's supposed cover story. "Actually, I work in event planning," she said, deciding honesty was simpler than elaborate lies. "I coordinate weddings mostly." If Nathan noticed the discrepancy, he showed no reaction. That must require patience. Bringing someone's vision to life while managing 1,000 details. "Most people assume it's all champagne and cake tastings," Becca admitted, surprised by his insight. "They don't see the crisis management or the midnight calls from panicked brides. The invisible work," Nathan said, nodding. "The kind that matters most, but gets noticed least." Something about the way he said it made her study him more carefully. His clothes were simple, almost threadbare at the edges. His watch was basic, nothing flashy, but his words carried weight, as if chosen carefully from a lifetime of experience. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you do?" "I work with educational programs," he said, "helping schools get resources they need. Nothing glamorous." The conversation flowed easier after that. They talked about Boston's unpredictable weather, favorite books, and the small joys that made ordinary days meaningful. Nathan listened with complete attention, never checking his phone or glancing around the room. When he laughed at her story about a wedding where the cake arrived at the wrong venue, the sound was genuine and warm. Unexpected depth an hour passed, then another. The cafe began to empty around them, but neither moved to leave. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said, his expression growing serious. "What makes you happy? Not what you think should make you happy, but what actually does." The question caught her off guard. Most first dates involved superficial exchanges and careful performances. Honest moments, she found herself saying. When people drop their masks and just exist as they are. "That's rare," he said softly. "Most people are terrified of being seen. Are you?" He considered this. turning his coffee cup slowly. I used to be. Now, I think hiding takes more energy than honesty. Something passed between them then, an unspoken understanding. Becca realized she had forgotten this was supposed to be fake, a favor for a friend. She had been present in this moment, drawn in by someone who spoke about life with quiet wisdom. As they finally prepared to leave, Nathan walked her to the door. Rain had softened to a gentle mist that haloed the streetlights. "I know this might sound strange," he said, "but I'm glad your grandmother arranged this. Not many people ask questions that matter." Becca felt guilt surge again, remembering she wasn't who he thought. But before she could confess, he continued. "Would you want to meet again? No expectations? Just coffee and conversation?" She should have said no, should have explained the mix-up and apologized for the deception. Instead, she heard herself agreeing, watched him smile, and felt something shift in her carefully guarded heart. Walking home through the misty streets, Becca replayed their conversation. She thought about his worn sweater, his thoughtful silences, and the way he looked at her like she was someone worth understanding. Whatever this was, it felt dangerous and genuine all at once. And for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't running from that feeling. 3 days passed before Becca saw Nathan again, though not by design. She was rushing through the Boston Public Garden on Thursday morning, her arms full of fabric samples for a client meeting. When she nearly collided with someone kneeling beside the pond, Nathan looked up from where he crouched next to a small boy who was crying. The child's toy boat had drifted too far from the edge, stuck among the lily pads. "Hold on," Nathan was saying gently. "We'll figure this out." He rolled up his sleeves, lay flat on the damp grass, and stretched his arm across the water. His fingers just barely caught the string attached to the small wooden vessel. When he handed it back to the boy, the child's face transformed from tears to pure joy. "Thank you, mister," the boy said, clutching his boat. Nathan simply smiled and stood, brushing grass from his jeans. That's when he noticed Becca standing there, fabric swatches slipping from her grasp. "Keep finding each other," he said, his eyes brightening with recognition. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "You didn't have to do that. Get all wet and dirty, I mean. It was just a boat," he said. But to him, it was everything. They walked together through the garden, neither acknowledging they were both heading in the same direction, despite having no reason to. The morning air carried the scent of late roses and fallen leaves. Joggers passed them on the winding paths while elderly couples fed the ducks. "I never got your number," Nathan said, after a comfortable silence. After our coffee, Becca felt panic flutter in her throat. She still hadn't told him the truth about who she was. Each day that passed made the deception feel heavier. "I've been busy with work," she said, which wasn't entirely a lie. 3 weddings this weekend. That sounds exhausting. It's controlled chaos," she admitted. "What? But there's something beautiful about it, too. Watching 2 people promise forever in front of everyone they love. Do you believe in it?" he asked. "Forever." The question felt weighted with more than curiosity. Becca thought about her failed engagement, about promises that crumbled like old paper. "I want to," she said honestly. "But I've learned that forever requires more than just love. It needs honesty and showing up even when things get hard." Nathan nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already suspected. "My father used to say that character shows up in small moments, not grand gestures. How you treat a waiter, whether you return a lost wallet, if you stop to help with a toy boat. Sounds like a wise man." Nathan said, his voice catching slightly. "He taught me that money means nothing if your soul stays empty." Growing closer over the following weeks, their meetings became less accidental and more intentional. Coffee on Saturday mornings at a small place in the North End, walks along the Charles River on Sunday afternoons, quiet dinner at a Vietnamese restaurant where Nathan knew the owner by name. Becca learned that he read poetry late at night when sleep wouldn't come, that he volunteered at a community center in Dorchester every Tuesday evening, helping kids with homework, that he preferred used bookstores to new ones, because he liked imagining the previous readers. She told him about her dreams of opening her own event planning business someday, about her mother who raised her alone after her father left, about the fiancé who chose ambition over love, leaving her to pick up the pieces of a future that dissolved overnight. He was a fool, Nathan said quietly when she finished that story. They were sitting on a bench, overlooking the harbor, watching ferries cut through the gray water. Or maybe I was, Becca replied, for believing someone when they said I was enough, only to learn I never was. Okay. Nathan turned to face her fully. You are enough, Becca. Anyone who couldn't see that was looking at something else entirely. The way he said her name made her realize something had shifted between them. This wasn't friendly anymore. This was something deeper, more fragile, more real. Moments of truth. One rainy evening, Becca invited Nathan to her apartment for the first time. She lived in a small studio in Jamaica Plain, walls covered with photographs from weddings she had coordinated and sketches of event layouts she dreamed of creating. He studied each image carefully, asking questions about the couples, the venues, the stories behind the celebrations. When he reached a watercolor painting she had done herself, a Boston street scene at twilight, he went very still. You painted this? Years ago, she said, suddenly self-conscious. Before I got too busy. It's beautiful, he said. Why did you stop? Life got complicated. I told myself I didn't have time. Or maybe you stopped believing you deserved to create just for yourself, he said gently. The observation cut close to bone. Becca busied herself making tea, her hands trembling slightly. When she returned to the small living area, Nathan was looking out the rain-streaked window. Can I tell you something? He asked without turning around. Of course. I wasn't always like this. Living simply. There was a time when I measured everything by what it cost, what it signaled, what it proved about me. His shoulders tensed. I lost someone I cared about because of it. She said I had forgotten how to be human. Becca set down the teacups and moved closer. What changed? Or I'm trying to. He finally looked at her, his eyes holding something vulnerable and honest. When I met you that first night, I expected another performance. Someone trying to impress me or figure out what I could offer them. Instead, you asked real questions and gave real answers. Guilt crashed over her again. She wasn't who he thought she was. She had started this entire connection with a lie. Nathan, I need to tell you something. Wait, he said, reaching for her hand. Before you do, I want you to know that whoever you are, whatever brought you into that cafe that night, I'm grateful. You remind me why small moments matter more than big gestures. His hand was warm around hers. Outside, rain drummed steadily against the windows. The space between them felt charged with everything unspoken. That night at the harborside, Becca began, her voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't supposed to be there. My friend Jasmine was sick, and I went in her place. I lied to you from the very beginning. She waited for anger, for disappointment, for him to pull away. Instead, Nathan started to laugh. Not mockingly, but with genuine surprise. I know, he said. Becca's eyes widened. What? My assistant mentioned Jasmine works in healthcare. You said event planning within 5 minutes. I've known since that first night that you weren't who my grandmother thought you were, and you didn't say anything. Because it didn't matter, he said simply. You were real with me, even if your name wasn't what was expected. That's more honesty than most people offer. Relief and confusion swirled through her. Why didn't you ask? Because I was hiding something too, Nathan admitted, and I wanted just a few moments where we could be two people getting to know each other without history or expectations in the way. What are you hiding? He hesitated, and she saw fear flicker across his face. Not yet, he said. Soon, I promise, but not yet. A perfect evening. They spent the rest of that evening talking until the rain stopped and stars appeared in the clearing sky. Nathan told her about his work with underfunded schools, about the kids whose faces lit up when they received new books or science equipment. Becca shared her secret dream of coordinating charity events that brought communities together. When he finally left close to midnight, he paused at her door. Thank you for telling me the truth. Thank you for already knowing it, she replied. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. Good night, Becca Morgan. The real you is exactly who I hope to find. After he left, Becca stood in her quiet apartment, touching the spot where his lips had been. She was falling for him, this mysterious man with worn clothes and a generous heart. And somewhere beneath her happiness, Worry whispered that his secret, whatever it was, might change everything. But tonight, she chose to believe that what they had was strong enough to survive truth. That love built on honest moments could weather any revelation. Outside her window, the city glittered with 1,000 lights, each one a story, each one a life intersecting with countless others. And in that vast web of human connection, she and Nathan had found each other against all odds. Whatever came next, she knew this feeling was real, and that was enough for now. The invitation arrived on a cold November morning. It's delivered by courier in a thick cream envelope. Becca had just finished confirming floral arrangements for a December wedding when her assistant knocked on her office door. "This just came for you," Michelle said, handing over the elegant package. "Looks important." Becca turned the envelope over in her hands. The weight of the paper alone suggested wealth. When she opened it, gold lettering shimmered against ivory cardstock. "The Cross Foundation cordially invites you to the annual education fundraising gala. Black tie. The Boston Harbor Hotel." Her breath caught. Cross Foundation. The name felt familiar, like something she should recognize, but couldn't quite place. The invitation listed her as the event designer for the evening, hired to create the visual experience for one of Boston's most prestigious charity events. "This is huge," Michelle said, reading over her shoulder. "The Cross Foundation donates millions every year. This could make your career." Becca should have felt excited. Instead, unease settled in her stomach. She had applied for this contract months ago, back when landing prestigious clients felt like an impossible dream. Now it felt like fate playing a complicated game. She didn't tell Nathan about it. Something held her back, though she couldn't explain why. They had been seeing each other for nearly 2 months now, falling into an easy rhythm of morning coffee and evening walks. He still hadn't told her his secret, and she hadn't pushed. Some part of her wanted to stay in this bubble where they were just two people learning to trust again. The night everything changed, the gala was 3 weeks away, which meant Becca barely slept. She designed centerpieces that looked like open books, with flowers growing from the pages, symbolizing knowledge blooming into beauty. She arranged lighting that would transform the ballroom into something magical. Every detail had to be perfect. The night of the event, she arrived early wearing a simple black dress she had bought specifically for the occasion. Her dark hair was pulled into an elegant twist, and for once, she felt like she belonged in these glittering spaces. The ballroom took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow lights across white tablecloths. Her book centerpieces looked even better than she had imagined, each one a small garden of possibility. Guests began arriving in expensive gowns and tailored tuxedos, their laughter filling the vast space. Becca stayed near the back, watching to ensure everything ran smoothly. She preferred being invisible at these events, the architect behind the scenes rather than the center of attention. The program began with speeches from various donors and board members. Then the host, a distinguished woman in a silver gown, stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the founder and chairman of the Cross Foundation, a man whose vision has transformed education for over 50,000 children across America. Please welcome Nathan Cross." The world tilted sideways. Becca's vision narrowed to a single point as Nathan walked onto the stage. Not her Nathan in his worn gray sweater and scuffed shoes. This Nathan wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that probably cost more than her rent. His hair was styled, his presence commanding. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. Her hands went numb. Her ears filled with static. This couldn't be real. The man who helped retrieve toy boats and volunteered at community centers wasn't supposed to be Nathan Cross, the billionaire philanthropist whose foundation dominated headlines. The man who read poetry in coffee shops wasn't supposed to own half of Boston's skyline. She watched him speak about education, equity, and breaking cycles of poverty. His voice was the same, gentle and sincere, but everything else felt like a stranger. "Education isn't charity," he said into the microphone. "It's an investment in human dignity. Every child deserves the chance to discover who they can become." The audience applauded thunderously. Becca felt tears burning behind her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. Around her, wealthy donors smiled and nodded. probably thinking about tax deductions and social capital. She had been so stupid. All those small moments, his humble lifestyle, the way he talked about helping schools. She had built a fantasy around a man who had been lying through omission the entire time. Confrontation. Becca slipped toward the exit before the speech ended. She needed air, needed space, needed to be anywhere but here. Her heels clicked too loudly on the marble floor as she hurried toward the coat check. Becca, his voice stopped her cold. She turned slowly, finding Nathan standing a few feet away. He had left the stage somehow, abandoning his own gala to follow her. "Don't," she said, her voice shaking. "Don't say my name like we're still friends. Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" She laughed bitterly. "That you're Nathan Cross? That while I was worrying about rent and student loans, you were worth billions? That every humble moment was just an act?" "It wasn't an act," he said, stepping closer. "Everything I showed you was real, except the truth." Tears finally spilled over, hot against her cold cheeks. "You let me believe we were the same? Two regular people trying to make sense of life. But you were playing pretend while I was falling in love with someone who doesn't exist." The words hung between them, raw and exposed. Nathan's face crumpled with pain. "I exist," he said quietly. "The man who sat with you in cafes, who walked through gardens, who listened to your dreams, that was me. Not the name, not the money, just me. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now?" Becca wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the heated ballroom. "You had so many chances to tell me. Every time we talked about honesty, about being real with each other, you stayed silent, because I was terrified," Nathan admitted, his composure finally cracking. "Do you know what it's like to never know if people want you or what you represent? My ex-fiancée left me when I lost everything in a business scandal 5 years ago. When I rebuilt and the money came back, she returned too. Said she had made a mistake. But she only loved the idea of what I could provide. So you lied to me instead? I wanted to be seen for once. Just once," his voice broke. "And you saw me, Becca. You saw the person I am when everything else is stripped away. I was selfish and wrong, but I wasn't pretending about how I feel." Becca closed her eyes, trying to process everything. The Nathan she knew still existed somewhere inside this billionaire stranger. But trust, once broken, was like shattered glass. You could put the pieces back together, but the cracks always showed. "I need time," she said finally. "I can't do this right now. How much time?" "I don't know." She looked at him fully. This man in his expensive tuxedo with eyes that still held the same gentleness she had fallen for. Maybe forever. The letter Becca left the gala and walked for hours through Boston's cold streets. By the time she reached her apartment, her feet ached, and her dress was damp from mist. She sat on her small couch, still in her gown, and let herself cry. Everything hurt. The betrayal, yes, but also the loss of what they had built. Those mornings drinking coffee while rain painted the windows. Those conversations that felt like coming home. She had been so careful with her heart after her engagement ended, and Nathan had slipped past every defense. 3 days passed in a fog. She ignored his calls and deleted his messages without reading them. Then a package arrived, hand-delivered to her office. Inside was a single envelope in a small velvet box. The letter was written in Nathan's careful handwriting. "Becca, I won't make excuses for my silence. You deserved the truth from the beginning, and I was too afraid to give it to you. But I need you to understand something. When my world fell apart 5 years ago, I lost everything. My company collapsed under accusations of fraud. My fiancée left. My friends disappeared. Only my father stood by me, and he died 6 months later." Becca's hands trembled as she continued reading. "I was cleared of all charges eventually, but the damage was done. I rebuilt the company and started the foundation using my inheritance, but I rebuilt myself too. I learned that wealth without character is just noise. That helping one child read is worth more than any board meeting. That the only opinion that matters is the one I see in the mirror. When I met you, I was tired of performances. I wanted to know if anyone could care about Nathan the person instead of Nathan Cross the name. It was unfair to test you that way. You were honest with me about pretending to be Jasmine, and I hid behind silence. I'm sorry. The velvet box contains the key to the community center in Dorchester, where I volunteer. I've signed over ownership to the foundation, but I wanted you to have a key too. Not as a grand gesture, but because you told me once that you dreamed of coordinating events that bring communities together. That center could use someone like you. I love you, Becca. Not because you're impressed by money or status, but because you reminded me why being human matters more than being successful. If you decide you can't forgive me, I'll understand. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the man you saw in me. Becca opened the velvet box with shaking hands. Inside was a simple silver key and a photograph. The picture showed Nathan at the community center, surrounded by smiling children, wearing his old gray sweater. On the back he had written, "This is who I am. Everything else is just noise." Second chances that Saturday morning, Becca walked to the Harborside Cafe. Rain fell softly the way it had the night they first met. Through the window, she saw Nathan sitting in their usual spot, wearing his worn sweater, reading the same poetry book. A cup of black coffee sat untouched in front of him. She pushed open the door. The bell chimed. He looked up, and hope and fear warred across his face. Becca crossed the cafe and sat down across from him, her heart pounding. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. "I'm still angry," she said finally. "I know, and hurt. I know that too. But I also understand why you did it." She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. "I've been thinking about what you said, about being seen. I get it, Nathan. After my engagement ended, I stopped believing anyone could love me without conditions. I built walls so high I couldn't see over them anymore." Nathan's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "So where does that leave us?" "I think," Becca said slowly, "it leaves us starting over. No more secrets, no more hiding. Just two imperfect people trying to build something real." "I can do that," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to do that." She finally closed the distance, letting her hand cover his. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and solid and real. Outside, the rain continued its gentle song against the windows. Inside, two people sat across from each other, damaged but hopeful, ready to write a new story built on truth instead of fear. It wouldn't be easy. Trust took time to rebuild, and scars didn't disappear overnight. But love, the real kind that survived revelation and chose to stay anyway, was always worth the risk. "Tell me something true," Becca said softly. Nathan smiled. The same smile that had captured her heart in the beginning. "You make me want to be better than I am. And I promise to spend every day proving I'm worthy of that gift." "That's a good start," she said, smiling through tears. And there, in the cafe where their story began, they chose to begin again. Not as strangers playing roles, but as themselves, fully seen and finally honest. The rest would unfold one moment at a time, built on the foundation of truth they should have started with. Sometimes love required falling apart before it could be built right. And sometimes the person who hurt you could also be the person who taught you how to heal.